Uh, did I do that right?
No, you
Did
sound
I
like Dr. Evil with a head cold.
trying to play? Great. Now I'm having pictures of Dr. Evil as Pinhead playing Pinhead. Yeah, there you go.
I would pay to see it.
We have such sights to show you.
Oh my God.
All I ask for Cenobites with hooks in their hands. That's all I want is Cenobites with hooks in their hands. Is that too much to ask? Woo!
We're
Yeah.
explorers.
New sensations. Wow. I suddenly want this to be a thing. Hello, everyone. And welcome to the spoiler room.
Wait, one more.
What,
You opened it. We came, baby.
This puzzle box is my jam, baby.
Dude, that's the next Austin Powers sequel. It takes place in the labyrinth. And Leviathan. No.
I got my mojo back, baby.
But at what cost?
At what cost? Oh, look at our one viewer. They took off. They're like, oh, fuck this shit. Hello, everyone. And welcome to another edition of the Spoiler Room. Sorry about the tangent, but yeah, now I'm just my brain. When I get ideas like that, then it just starts running with it, and then I'm like, I just can't stop it because it's this. I want to see this now. Wow.
Me too. In fact, let's not talk about this movie. Let's just go make the Austin Powers Hellraiser spinoff.
Let's just write the Austin Powers Hellraiser spinoff. Yes. Let's do that. But yes, welcome everyone. It is another edition of the Spoiler Room. Thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite. Hey, all right, drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. And last week we talked about Hellraiser from 1987, the Clive Barker classic. And I decided, because what the hell, it's my show, damn it. I decided, why not talk about the most recent Hellraiser, which is, some people call it a reboot, some people call it a sequel, some people call it takes place in the world adjacent. Wherever you take it, I'm not sure. We'll find out tonight. And who's here with me to do exploring? Well, it's none other than the one and only Mr. Ian Simmons, who keeps coming back for more. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I can tell. You're ready to talk Hellraiser 2022.
No, but I'm doing great.
Oh, this will be an interesting conversation. Well, go ahead and give us a synopsis then of Hellraiser 2022.
It's a giant metaphor for addiction. The puzzle box is back. The Cenobites are back. They're a little bit different than as we've seen them before, but they are pursuing, I guess, kind of a group of 20-somethings who are all wrapped up in this. I don't know. There's like this rich guy who's. I can't give a synopsis for this movie because it changes what kind of movie it is halfway in the middle, and so I don't know what to make of it. There's this rich guy played by Goran Viznik who has the puzzle box, and he's like trying to get people to open it so he can figure out the different kinds of configurations and summon the Cenobites so he can get an audience with Leviathan, who is the giant diamond-shaped lament configuration Lord of Hell that we saw in Hellraiser 2, which we'll be discussing next week.
Yes.
And then there's chains and blood and guts, and oh my gosh, there's probably going to end up being another one.
So I'm gathering you're not you weren't amazed and impressed by this film.
I was amazed and impressed by the first hour. And this is where I differ from a lot of people, because they say, because this movie is just about 2 hours long, which is really long for a horror movie. I know this movie Terrifier 2 that came out recently I think it's the longest slasher ever. It's like 2 hours and 18 minutes or something.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Terrifier 1, so I can't speak to that. But 2 hours is a long time for a horror movie. You really have to be on your game. And for the first hour, I thought Hellraiser 2022 was on that game. I thought this is an adult Hellraiser film. We're seeing aspects of this universe that we haven't seen before. And then the second hour, almost exactly on the mark, I can tell where the bit where my heart sank. There's a number of characters who get into a van. One of them is injured and they start driving away. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose in the van.
We have a Nightmare on Elm Street moment. It's almost like Nightmare on Elm Street in a way, the way that plays out. Just the surrealness of it, to where she's in the back of the van and stretches out. It played out similar to what you might expect to see in like a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes, but I was thinking, what I was immediately thinking of was Freddy versus Jason, the bit where they're in the back of the van and everything kind of goes wrong. And then it just becomes, okay, the van crashes, I think, and then they're just running around the woods and they go to the house. And then it just is like, it just becomes another direct-to-video bad Hellraiser sequel. All of the interesting ideas stop dead in their tracks. And I was so checked out in the last half. It was really disappointing. I don't like the new Cenobite designs. I think a lot's being made about Jamie Clayton as the new, Hell Priest or whatever. Looks great. Talks way too much. I don't like this movie, Mark.
You don't say.
The thing is, I started out loving it. And then by the end, I was like, what happened? What do you think, Mark?
I mean, I was entertained. I enjoyed it. I will say the first half, until they get to the van, the first half that first hour definitely had me far more intrigued than the second half. Overall, I didn't hate the film at all. I didn't feel like I wasted my time. I was like, oh, I wasn't necessarily blown away like some people were, because, and this is going to sound really weird, the film amazed me in that it felt like it was trying to go dark, but at the same time, it was rather tame, even though you have similar elements to what was in the first film. There was something maybe a little too polished about it versus, the way the 87 was, because the 80 and yes, folks, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do these back and back. We are going to compare the two just because they're very similar. And the 87 one just felt grimier, felt sleazier in a way. It felt darker. It felt just, like hell. And here I loved all the production design and everything, but it was really polished in many ways, and that surprised me. And I enjoyed the Cenobites, most of them, quite a bit. I thought they were very, interesting visually in their designs. They were trying to, call back to the Cenobites from the first one. You can tell in some of their design a bit for a couple of them. They were trying to give them maybe a modern update. But the story, in all honesty, is trying to be extreme, but it's also tame at the same time. It's hard to explain, but it's got all the right elements for me to where I'm like, oh, this is going to be some dark, sleazy, grimy stuff going on. And then when you get to that second half, you're like, oh, this is a little more polished. This is a little bit more. Now we're getting into this house that's locked. And I'm like, my Lord, they've pretty much combined the first 4 Hellraisers into this movie.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
I'll just come out and say it, for worse. I mean, at this point, Mark, I'm 45 years old. I don't go to a new Hellraiser movie to see how they can, creatively dismember people, because the truth is they can't. Unless you're going to go Mike Martyr's level to the point where it is so graphically extreme that you get nauseous watching realistic, prolonged violence. It's just the Cenobites aren't interesting anymore. And I think they're made less. I don't like the designs of the new ones
Mm.
because they tried to do this whole thing of like, well, they're not wearing the leather daddy outfits anymore. That's all, they're dressed in flesh. I'm like, well, yeah, but now they just look like Resident Evil monsters. The new Chatterer looks like he was just ripped from a Resident Evil video game. Like, he has no features except for like shiny blackish gray blue skin, and then the chattering mouth.
Mhm.
But again, I've seen that in the Resident Evil video games and some of the movies. They've got the one who I think is called the Gasp, and
Mhm.
she's the one like the Asian looking Cenobite with the kind of the pulled head,
Right.
but she
Yeah.
looks like a less artistic version of Angelique from Hellraiser Bloodline. Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of excited by Jamie Clayton, who, from what I understand, is a non-binary
Right.
performer,
Mhm.
and there was a big deal made about that, and I'm like, that's cool, because in the novella, the Hellbound Heart,
Mhm.
Pinhead, or the Hell Priest, I think he was described
Right.
there, is kind of this asexual being,
Mhm.
nothing like Doug Bradley. But then again, Doug Bradley works for 1987. Jamie
Yeah.
Clayton does not work for 1987 as far as like
No.
a mainstream horror film. The problem is, it's just people gave a lot of shit to, I can't remember if it was Hellraiser Revelations. It was that guy who really looked weird playing Pinhead from a few years
Yeah.
ago. To me, there's no qualitative difference between that Pinhead and this Pinhead, because
Wow.
they're all just not Doug Bradley.
I didn't mind that it wasn't Doug Bradley. I liked the design. I thought the Hell Priest that they have for this Hellraiser was fitting for this Hellraiser, and it really intrigued me in that first hour. The whole idea, where I was surprised to see chains. Oh, okay. I liked no,
Why were you surprised to see chains?
no, I was surprised. Well, because this is modern horror, I was surprised to see someone actually get all hooked up with chains. And I was like, okay, cool. And I thought it was interesting. Yeah, the whole thing with addiction. They're choosing addiction instead of sex this time around. Whereas sex was, it was for the 87 one. This is a whole new story. And I really, for that first hour, I was really intrigued. The second half of it, I thought it was all right, but it does fall more into kind of a standard, straightforward, like, oh, versus the just weird, like we talked about the one last week, the first one, just this wow, how it's not really how the Cenobites in that aren't really the villains in that, what they're just called. I mean, they're just the tools. They aren't exactly full on bad guys till possibly the end. And in this one, these Cenobites are a bit more, uh, you know, uh, plotting and a little bit more evil. You do have the rich guy, who I loved. I loved that design. In all honesty, the way the rich guy, how, because he's the guy. It opens with, um, the rich guy,
Voight.
Voight. Thank you. I just like calling him rich guy. But Voight, he has the puzzle box, and it's in its second last configuration, and he brings in a gentleman who is looking for him to have possibly some intimate time with, and he goes, hey, sure, pick up that puzzle box, and the puzzle box stabs him, and it turns into its final configuration, and then we're not quite sure what happens from then. And it's not till later on we find out about the different configurations of the box, which I'm not sure if that's from the source material or not, but I found that very interesting on how the different box configurations stood for specific feelings, or conditions, whereas that wasn't really, in the first one, it was more, it just calls the Cenobites. That's it. It's like, hello, hey, how you guys doing? Hook me, daddy, hook me with your leather hooks. um you know and in this one, each configuration had a different meaning, and it's because of blood. And so I found that interesting. I loved what they did with the puzzle box, and I liked the slight variation. I just thought that it could have gone even a little more bizarre, but it seemed to fall a little bit more into standard tropes in that last act for sure.
That's the thing is the second half of the movie, I think, is so just bad that it makes me not like the stuff that I overlooked in the first half of the movie. Because
Okay.
honestly, okay, the reveal of the puzzle box, I
Mm,
think, is great because it's on a this kid that you mentioned who was going to possibly try and hook up with Voight walks into this room, and there's all these kind of domed artifacts on pedestals, and there's one pedestal that does not have a cover on it, and that's the
right.
one with the box, of course. And we see the box from a straight on view, and then the camera kind of swoops over it, and you see that it's actually the front part, and it's actually an elongated, almost like a rough hourglass shape that leads into the
Right.
other end of the box. That's interesting.
Mhm.
We see the box transform a lot. We've seen it change in the other movies,
Mhm.
but my problem here, I don't like the numerous configurations. I don't know if that's canon for maybe some of the comic books. I mean, it wasn't really established in the first couple of Hellraiser movies that each shape meant something necessarily. But I just got the feeling it was more business, more lore that
Mhm.
doesn't really have anything to do with what the Cenobites are after. They're
Right.
not going to come and spin the wheel. Do you want lust? Do you want power? Do you want, Lazarus? All this other stuff. It's like they know what's in the hearts of the people that summon them. But
Mhm.
watching the box transform, I thought it looked cool, but to me, it just felt very much like I'm watching Michael Bay's Transformers version of the puzzle box. Like
Wow.
it's all of this stuff happening mechanically, but it's just a
Mhm.
distraction. It doesn't move
Mhm.
anything along. It's just, you know, the mechanics of the puzzle box from the original films is very simple. You manipulate it, a piece rises out, maybe it turns clockwise and sets down. This thing is like going all oobly doobly. It's almost like nanobot technology inside the Glimmet configuration. I don't need that shit in my life.
And for me, I found it interesting. I guess I found that interesting that they are at least trying to do something different with it, and I enjoyed the different configurations. And it plays out at the end when you get to choose your reward because Voight, we found out after basically was able to get this young man to be the sacrifice basically and get stabbed by the puzzle box so it can go to its final configuration so he could talk to Leviathan. We find out later where everybody thinks Void is dead. He's not dead. He's been living in his house, which has Cenobite defense technology in it. Not quite sure how it works. We won't really
They
go into
don't
it, but
did because I had heard someone talking before I watched the movie about how
Mhm,
the Cenobites cannot pass through like wrought iron doors or gateways or
mhm.
something. Was that actually, I may have missed it because I was probably falling asleep. Was that mentioned in the actual film itself? I mean, we see that they can't get through these
Right.
doors, and that shit reminded me of the climax of the Phantom Menace where they're turning the power shields on during the Duel of the Fates. I'm like, you guys are just delaying the inevitable. There's no drama. There's no tension here. We know that this person's going to get through the door and this is going to happen. It's just so tiresome. It's like welcome to the movies, gang. But yeah, again, I don't know why there's all of a sudden all these rules, and the Cenobite rules are very simple. You solve the puzzle box, they show up. If you
Right.
happen to have the box in your hand and you can maneuver it just so, you can send them back.
Mhm.
That's all you need to know. Unless you're going to do something interesting and expand the mythos. I got a little bit excited when we kept seeing the shifting walls and the paneling. I mean, in that first
Mhm.
hour, you get glimpses into the hallways of hell, but then you get a sense of the budget and the limited scope and imagination of this crew because we never go there. That's one of the beautiful things about Hellraiser 2 is you would never get from watching Hellraiser 1 that Hellraiser 2 is possible. You think,
Right.
okay, Hellraiser 2, it's going to be another house and more, another someone else picks up the box.
Mhm.
No, we're going to go into hell and explore ideas and avenues of the labyrinth. What does it mean to be stuck there? In this one, it's just like, yeah, it's a giant house, and it's the giant diamond comes down at the bottom, and Wow.
See, I like the idea that Voight, that, you're dealing with Leviathan, aka whatever you want to call Devil, Beelzebub, whatever. You're dealing with hell, and you're trying to make a deal with hell, and he made a deal with hell, and he's got this where Voight, we find out, wasn't dead. He's been living like a hermit in his mansion with this contraption on him that he got for when he asked for from Leviathan a special gift. Because what ends up happening, folks, is that our final person, her brother ends up getting sucked into the puzzle box. He's the first victim because she runs across the puzzle box. She had taken some drugs because there was in a fight, and her brother went looking for her, and she accidentally enabled the first configuration, which released the Cenobites for the first time. Mm-hmm. And they came and they took her brother away. And so that's what she's spending the rest of her time doing, is figuring out how she can get her brother back. And after she discovers that oh, hey, I could get a deal with Leviathan. Then they start coming up with a plan. Well, how are we going to get through the configurations without killing people? And I like that idea too. I like that they used the Cenobites against themselves, against the configuration. She was actually able to stab the Chatterer with the puzzle box, and that still counted as a soul, I guess, to convert the puzzle. They do play. You're right. I mean, you're right. They do play fast and loose with the rules in this film. And I can see where that would be a problem. I guess I was entertained and found it interesting, but yeah, they do play hard and fast with the rules quite a bit in this. Riley is the main character, played by Odessa Zion.
Yeah, I mean, there's, when I say that this feels like the later Hellraiser sequels, I'm talking about like the direct-to-video stuff. At a certain point, it became more about like, okay, we've got Doug Bradley as Pinhead. What other kind of cool Cenobite designs can we come up with? And we'll throw those together, and that will substitute for the story. We have a lot of Cenobites in this movie.
Like, there are a lot,
lurking around the shadows. But that's the thing, is like, aside from there's like 3 of them, including the Hell Priest, that actually really do anything, and the other one's like, oh, I think I saw a glimpse of a guy who looked like he had something different sticking out of his head. That's the thing, is more does not necessarily equal better, and it just kind of becomes this, again, Resident Evil style monster movie where they're all together in the house and they do the whole thing where like there's different people in different rooms facing off against different Cenobites. It felt like the first Hellraiser and even Hellraiser 2 feel like classy horror monster movies, if that makes sense, because they kind of eschew a lot of the cliche things that you'd expect from that scenario. Whereas, because again, the Cenobites are like the cosmic police. Like, they're there to take what, they were summoned. They've got the search warrant in the form of the box. They got to take the evidence back to hell, and that's all they care about. Now, they kind of break that, as we discussed last week at the end of Hellraiser, by kind of going after, Kirsty, but I'll forgive that. That's the last 5 minutes of the movie. This thing drags on for 40 minutes, way past it should have. Now, the one thing I think was a fantastic and really interesting story idea that has no right being in this movie, and this is the spoiler room, so if you haven't seen this, turn it off now. Riley wants her brother back. Really annoying, because he keeps showing up as like the phantom brother. We saw this in Stephen King's It and every other fucking movie where there's like, someone's dead, but like, if they come back, it's going to be all wrong. Pet Cemetery, etc. But she decides, when it's her turn, she turns her back on the entire thing. She chooses the lament configuration, which basically means she just has to live with herself that she chose to not get the gift that the Cenobites were offering. I thought that was a really interesting idea. It's similar to a thread of Hellraiser 2, where Kirsty goes into hell in order to find her father because she believes he's been unjustly
Right.
imprisoned there. Like, get into the morality of the Hellraiser universe. It's a place we haven't really gone before because Pinhead teases it in the 87 version, angels to some, demons to other. Is there balance, or is there only Leviathan? And what happens
Right.
to innocent souls? Is there such a thing? Because Riley's brother, when he gets taken, that kind of hurt. I was like, that sucks. He was a person trying to do the right thing, and he got a raw deal. Does that count against him in the afterlife? Those are things I'd rather see explored than, oh no, it's the Cenobites again.
Yeah, I thought the way it ended was really interesting. That she chose that because they were playing at the whole thing of, and then you're wondering once you see that, Voight chose one of the choices, which
It was power.
yeah, he chose power. It coincides with one of the configurations of the puzzle box, and well, he got power, but he eternal life, but he got pain with it. He gets this contraption, this kind of steampunk contraption from hell, literally, and
It's a fantastic closing scene. That's the other thing. Like his
yeah,
whole transformation, that is something that we haven't seen in Hellraiser before. Unfortunately, it's the last 2 minutes of this movie.
yeah, because he manages to actually call to get freed from his prison, and then something nastier, of course, happens to him because that's just the way it works when you're dealing with Cenobites. But I was concerned when she chose Lament. I was just a little concerned going, are they still gonna do something when she turns, her back or whatever or something? But no, they didn't, which I did like because like you said, that made it interesting and that just opened up a whole okay, so depending on your choice, Cenobites will go, yeah, okay, go on, take off. We're not gonna do anything. You wanna live with yourself. You could get your brother back. Never mind that your brother could come back as a transformer or some other thing, some mutated person. They could bring him back undead or whatever. If you ask for something, and it opens up the question, with them, if you ask for something that's selfish, are you going to get the pain along with it versus you're asking for, like in this case, the Lament? It wasn't something selfish. She chose to probably take the most, it's still painful, but it wasn't a selfish choice, and so she gets away without having a contraption attached to her body somewhere.
Right, but I mean that's another thing is like if Riley's had a tough life. She's an addict. She's done bad things for money. She's very disturbed, and her brother kicks her out of the apartment, which is kind of the inciting incident for this whole thing. It's possible that after this is all over, she'll get her act cleaned up and find a way to deal with this trauma. But it's also possible that she's going to lead a miserable, sad, lament-filled life. And if
Right.
that's the case, that is also kind of the Cenobites winning because, as Pinhead liked to refer to as the sweet, sweet suffering.
Yeah.
Maybe they can draw on that kind of psychic energy, that maybe that's power to Leviathan as well, on top of the fact that eventually she's going to die, and probably, as far as we know, everybody in this reality goes to hell. So they're
Yeah.
just
Doesn't
playing
matter
the
what you do.
right. They're just playing the long game. I mean, what is Riley's probably in her 20s. What's 60 years to a Cenobite? It's like 5 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much. It'll be 5 minutes, and some of the Cenobites, they seem to enjoy their job more than others, which I thought was interesting. The Gasper, she seemed to enjoy her job a lot. The Gasp uh, seemed to enjoy her job quite a bit.
Well, I mean, I know there's been, as I mentioned, comics and
Mhm.
like other kinds of fiction that kind of talk about Cenobites and their relationships with each other and with Leviathan. Why not make a Hellraiser movie that is about that? Call it I Cenobite, because I wonder about that kind of thing. The whole idea is they've been transformed into these enforcers of Leviathan's will in our dimension and possibly others. I mean, wouldn't it be great to explore other realities? But Do they still feel pain? How do they feel about that? What do they think about their condition? Is there any hope? Is the Cenobite the final stage? Is there, could they ascend to become Leviathan? Is it like a kingdom that eventually
Mhm.
gets, swapped out leadership? I don't know, but I'd rather watch something that has ideas behind it than another. We're running around the woods and then we go to the big house and murder happens.
Well, and like you said, the first half wasn't like that. They got into the servant of Voight, and how there was this very interesting section where Riley and her boyfriend, they decide to track down Voight's caretaker. And that's a fun scene where she's kind of resigned herself to, I mean, she's got lung cancer, she's in hospice, and they show up with the puzzle box, and she's like, oh yeah. And then Cenobites show up, and she seems to kind of accept her place. She's like, yeah, I did bad things.
Well,
Kind
I
of
don't
expected this.
Right. I don't know if this was on the filmmakers' minds at all, but that's one of the things that was really interesting about this to me is it felt like they were trying to do almost a rip from the headlines Hellraiser movie,
Mhm.
because Voight in that opening with the party and that kid who's kind of
Right.
wandering through the mansion, he's looking into these rooms. There's all sorts of questionable people doing questionable things to each other. And then we meet the handler, who is this older lady who is, procuring things for him and making deals. I was thinking immediately of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, this is kind of an interesting idea. And you've got, again, this druggy runaway kid, Riley. Is she going to get mixed up into that and then
Mhm.
bring the world of Hellraiser into that? You've got people who are doing such demonic things on Earth that they make the Cenobites seem like, innocent by comparison.
Right.
That's a great thing to explore. But at
Mhm.
the hour mark, they get rid of all the adults except for Voight, and he's just kind of this, a knockoff of Dr. Chenard in some way from Hellraiser 2. And it's just, again,
Yeah.
it becomes about dumb 20 somethings going up against ancient evil. And that's, yeah, I was on board with this movie until I realized that it's not exactly a bait and switch, but like the ideas that I wanted to see, and this is just purely subjective, walked right out the room.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot more potential for some scenes in here, especially where it ended up is not where I expected it to, determined by how it started. I will say that.
Where were you thinking?
it, it, I'm not sure. I was thinking either maybe she ends up being pulled in and being made a new priest, or something along that lines, where she at the last half would be her going into hell, because we are combining a number of ideas from the first like 3 or 4 Hellraisers in here, where we're going to see her more in hell, because we do get glimpses of hell
Mm-hmm.
uh in here, and go find her brother that way, a la Lucifer, going down into hell, or Constantine going down and finding someone you're looking for. And then we get to see more of the hellscape, because I was curious about how that was going to look in the modern version. But it did fall a little bit more by the numbers, and yeah, I don't need everything handheld to me. I just when they get to the house and they trap the Cenobites in there, I'm like, oh, okay, he designed it. I'm not quite sure why it works, but he's designed this building to trap them. I'm like, okay, I didn't need any more explanation than that, but
I do. I'm sorry, because here's the thing. This again is something out of Hellraiser Bloodline,
Mhm.
which is this guy, the architect, who's the descendant of the person who created the puzzle box. He ends up becoming an architect who uses mathematical equations to design a trap. He figures out that the lament configuration is actually a mathematically sound trap for the Cenobites.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense necessarily, but at least it is an explanation instead of like, hey, I just put a cage around my house and now the Cenobites can't come in.
Yeah, that's very true. And he's got secret passages and stuff. I loved this house. This house was really interesting.
The house is more interesting than what was going on in it, and that's a big problem.
That is true. It was a little bit more interesting than what was going on it, and the ending I think helped save some things for me versus for that one section. Again, I was entertained. I wasn't too blown away by it. And at the end of it, I was like, somehow you managed to take it to where you've got all the look of extreme things are going to happen. And don't get me wrong, there are some fairly violent deaths for 2022, but not nearly. I watched this after I watched Werewolf by Night,
which I still haven't caught up with. I've heard great things.
I won't spoil it for you, but I'll just say that, yes, please. May I have another Disney? Okay, I'm the DC shill, and I'm sitting here watching Werewolf by Night going, this. I want this. Give me this right here. This is my jam. And, for the most part, the new Hellraiser was my jam, too. I just, it's one of those things where, yeah, Will stated, hey, he's in the comments. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Will.
So glad you could pop in. And that's exactly how I felt. The movie was fine for me. I didn't hate it. And no, I will not come to the dark side, Marvel horror supremacy. No, I enjoyed that film. I will never fully, I just love good stuff. Okay. Hashtag DC shill. But no, it was fine. It's for modern horror, in all honesty, for some of the modern horror films that aren't attached to A24, it was decent. It was well made. I thought. I love the music. There's callbacks to the original music. I was very happy to see that, in all honesty. I was wondering how they were going to handle the music, because there is it plays such a part in the original, that here we get the similar theme again, which was nice. I like the revisit to the Hellraiser theme. I liked the design of the priests, though there could be a little more leather involved. There could be a little more leather. I would have liked to see that.
It's just a bizarre choice, because once you decide, oh, everything is going to be variations of flesh tone, these aren't very well lit. And aside from the Hell Priest and maybe the Gasp, you don't get a whole lot of close-ups on these things that are also well lit, so you can look at the definition of them. We got some great glimpses of what the Cenobites look like in in Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2. Of course, by the time you get into the later sequels, it's all just like, hey, look at the Cenobites parading all over the place, But back in the originals, the first couple, there was still some mystery about them, but you could clearly tell who they are. They were distinct kind of people. And this, again, they all just looked like fleshy silhouettes out of Resident Evil, and with a little bit of Hellraiser inspiration, I guess.
Power Ranger villains, are you calling them? No, just kidding.
I would not insult Power Ranger villains that way.
Wow. You really didn't care for this movie.
No, and that's the thing, is I liked the one thing that was a big distraction. I don't know if you picked up on this, but Trevor, I think, was the boyfriend, Riley's boyfriend, right? Played by Drew Starkey. I kept thinking of him as box wine Chris Evans. Like, he looks so much like Chris Evans, and he's playing this like strung out dirtbag. I'm like, what is even going on here? But the cool thing about his character is that I in no way predicted that he was going to be a bad guy helping Voight to lure people into the house. I fell on the floor gasping for breath. I'm like, no, say it isn't so. How could you do that to me?
I like that twist. I like that he was working with Voight.
What twist, Mark? A twist is when something unexpected happens.
It was what? The good-looking guy you did believe was truly in it because he cared for Riley? You did really believe that? What?
No.
No, it was a twist. I was happy that they gave his guy a little bit more, at least depth. At least gave his guy a little more character than the really, you're okay. I mean, you and Riley, all right, but and then Riley, he kind of lures Riley into stealing this box and whatnot, and she didn't suspect anything. It was there were a couple of question marks in there, but for me, I was just like waiting for the next appearance of the priest and the Cenobite stuff. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do next here?
Well,
and I felt bad for that, but that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah, I mean yeah, maybe I'm trying to think like all the good characters. Well, no, I mean, there's some good characters in this movie. Like,
There are.
was it Matt was the brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Colin was Matt's boyfriend, and I liked their dynamic a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that by the end of the movie, they are just people caught up at the end of a horror movie. I mean, I think about something like Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and the
Mm-hmm.
Taryn character who was addicted to drugs and everything, and the way that you could see her struggle and her vulnerability, and that like she got the self-esteem to take on Freddy Krueger at the end, but then that little seed of addiction was just not enough to save her, and she succumbed to it. I wanted to see something more about that because this movie started out being about a bunch of really important things, and at the end they didn't even like really use it to that full potential. And fine is a word to describe this movie. If you have not seen any Hellraisers past 1 or 2, because because there's like what 6 7 direct to video sequels, I don't even
More
know.
than that, I think it's 10 or 11 now. I don't know.
Right, because I think the thing is 5 years from now this movie is going to be seen as like, oh, it's just Hellraiser 10. I don't think this is going to be enough to launch like a new franchise. Doug Bradley's position as the icon of this series is in no danger. As wonderful as Jamie Clayton is, I'm sure it's just not going to happen.
Well, we'll see though. I mean, it is for this is number 11. I was actually right. I guessed right. Holy crap. I might know something. Shh. But
you know a lot, Mark. Give yourself some credit.
But yeah, I liked her character in here, the priest. I think she maybe deserved a better script than what they ended up getting, because that's what I was saying, all the elements are there, the Cenobites stuff, the even the stories that I enjoyed with the configuration in that. There's a lot of potential here to really go to some unique and unexpected directions that we don't see in modern horror, and it ended up taking the road very much traveled near the end, unfortunately. And again, I still enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, but it was one of those to where near the end I wasn't quite as intrigued as I was at the beginning of the film when we first get to see the priest and that, and it takes a while before you actually get to see the priest, but once you do, I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. What's this version like? What are we getting? And we get glimpses of it, and then it ends up taking kind of the normal formula, and you're just like,
I guess that's my question. And I'm skipping ahead. I can see some of these comments here. Will, I assume that's still you saying
it is still Will. Yep.
Hell Priest was fantastic. Will and Mark, I guess, tell me, aside from visually, how is Hell Priest different from Pinhead? What is new about this character? What does this character bring to this new iteration that makes them worthy of Clive Barker perhaps writing another story centered around this version of the Hell Priest?
Which, according to Will, says Clive Barker mania.
Yes.
He was, I guess for me, part of it with the Hell Priest was the difference between her and Doug Bradley's lead Cenobite, as he was even called. He wasn't even called Pinhead or Priest. Right. He was just called lead Cenobite in the first
That's
film.
Right, yeah. I think even in the if I remember the novel, I haven't read in a while. I think it was lead Cenobite or something like that. I think Hell Priest was a later
with
name.
with the priest here, for me, they seem to have, I don't want to say necessarily charisma or whatnot. There was just a bit more. It's hard to say what it was about them that I liked more. I mean, I love Doug Bradley. Don't get me wrong. I love Bradley. Yeah, it's her presence that she had. She had a different presence than the original Pinhead. Pinhead, like you mentioned, actually was a good analogy of the Cenobites being kind of the police of hell, or for Leviathan or whatnot. Who he really just seemed like he was there for a job. And she seemed to have, the priest seemed to have just a bit more, I don't, amusement, maybe a little more, just a little glimpse of charisma, of emotion, maybe. And Will says it. He says it's a tough task to replace such an icon. Playful undertone, that's what it is, with a pinch of sexual kink, reminded me of the Borg Queen a bit. She did
Well, again, I'm saying, aside from the visuals, like what is it? What is this charisma that I'm not picking up on? Because I mean, Pinhead from the original 87 version, and even more so in Hellraiser 2, he had a bit more personality. He wasn't a Freddy Krueger type, jokester, but there was that scene where he and the other Cenobites laughed at Kirsty when she, basically talked about wanting to see her dad.
right.
And the original movie, there is a restraint to their presence because they are just kind of doing a job until they realize that Frank has escaped them, and then he gets angry. And it's not like a full-on, scene chewing anger, but it's like
Right.
got a snarling thing, like you do not want to be on this guy's bad side. I'm asking about Jamie Clayton's performance. What is there? I'm taking visuals off the table because I literally think any person could have been in that outfit and done that, with the black contacts and just given that, intense stare and delivered way too much of that dialogue, and it would have been the same thing.
I didn't think there was that much dialogue for her. I mean, more than, sure, the first Pinhead we got, but I don't know. There was just seemed to be a bit more amusement, a little bit more as playfulness to her character, to the priest, than Bradley had the first time we get to see his character. Will says a sinister sexuality to her presentation, acting choice, not visual look. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to put into words for me. It's just that I like them both. Don't get me wrong. I think they're both fitting for the films that they're in. And for her, for the priest, I don't know. Amusement, maybe. They seem to have more amusement to what was going on, to their job there.
I got more of that out of the gasp.
Oh yeah, yeah,
she was straight
definitely out
up
of the
like,
gasp.
not that she had a mustache, but she was like straight up like mustache twirling with like the kind of the wide-eyed enjoyment. But I mean, and I would probably have to go back and watch this movie again, which I will never do. But Jamie Clayton's performance reminds me of those Darth Vader memes where it's like a 9 square of Darth Vader with the same look on his face, and it says happy, sad, angry.
Yeah, I can see that. Like I said, it's hard to put into words. Will's definitely better at putting things into words than I am. As he says, Bradley was more direct, Shakespearean at times. Hell Priest has a playfulness, but obviously, like I'm going to mess with you. Yeah, and the gasp too. There almost felt like, and I was fascinated. I really want a story that involves a relationship between Cenobites, including, say, a power shift or someone vying for the role, because you get the idea that the gasp wants the position that the priest is is in some ways, the way, because she's more ambitious at going at the souls than the priest was, actually, in some ways, and almost seemed to go off on their own a bit, which made you wonder about that dynamic there. But the dynamic between the Cenobites here was definitely, I would have loved to see it explored more, because I think there's something interesting there to, like you said, exploring. Well, how's the power structure work? Why is the priest and the other one's following her? It's like, why is she the lieutenant? And are other people vying to be lieutenants? Because that's the impression I got with the Gasp was, oh, maybe, it's the Gasp wants to be the priest, and they're going off on their own for some reason, saying, yeah, I'm not going to follow your orders. But as far as the priest, the character itself goes, I don't know. I found a playfulness with this Pinhead, a little bit more enjoyment versus not just doing their duty. And yeah, I mean, there's some charisma there. I just would have liked to see more things explored versus them going into the straight, okay, now we're getting to the final configuration. Who's going to get backstabbed? What? Where?
Now, Will does mention the line "Save your breath for screaming." It's a good line, but it's also something that you could imagine Doug Bradley saying. I mean, he said, "We'll tear your soul apart. Your suffering will be legendary, even in hell." I mean, it's not uncharacteristic for this character, but
Right.
yeah.
I don't know. There was just something about the priests. I like both equally. I think you're, like you said, we may get another Hellraiser, in which case a newer Hellraiser, which hopefully maybe would explore the priest character more by chance. You know, so there is that possibility.
I started reading the Scarlet Gospels when it came out years ago, and I think I just sold it to Half Price Books or something because I didn't know anything about Harry D'Amour from Lord of Illusions. I'm like, what am I reading?
Mhm.
But after watching this, I kind of got, and this whole month has gotten me into sort of the Hellraiser spirit. So I think I may just have to reread the Hellbound Heart and give the Scarlet Gospels another chance.
Right, because Will said that that explores the hierarchy of hell, and I guess it's Pinhead versus Harry D'Amour from Lord of Illusions, which I'm down for that because I love Lord of Illusions. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't blown away by Hellraiser 2022, but I didn't feel like I wasted my time at all. I did still enjoy it. I enjoyed how it played out at the end. I thought it was a serviceable film. I ended on the positive side far more than the negative with it, but I can definitely see your points with it. I guess for me, considering how much modern horror I've watched, this one is not so bad. It was entertaining for me, on the whole, and there are some interesting ideas. They just don't. They seem like they want to go there, but they chose not to. I don't know if it's to try to appeal to a more wider audience, but I would have liked to see just a bit more exploration into the darker corners that are hinted at in this film, but we never get to really see fully fleshed out. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, it's an odd choice because I mean this movie went right to Hulu, much like Prey did early this year.
Mhm.
I don't know what they would have. Maybe they didn't know that it was going to go straight to Hulu. Maybe they did, but it just seems like they got rid of those like the highfalutin ideas to turn it into like a dead teenager movie at the end to appeal to a certain crowd who they thought might buy tickets or something to see this in the theater. If they had gone balls to the wall and made a more Hellraiser 2-esque exploration of some of these grand themes that have been circling around this franchise for 30 years, I don't think they would have lost anything because it's Hulu.
Mhm.
You put it on, you're probably going to, if you're into Hellraiser, you're going to watch the entire thing. If you're not into Hellraiser, you're probably not going to turn it on at all. So, yeah, it's just this. It's kind of like whenever we get long in the tooth on franchises, I'm always frustrated at them just going back to the same
Mhm.
well because they think it's going to make just enough to get to the next one instead of doing something that's going to make people stand up and take notice and want to see new stuff for years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting choice because especially with what else has been released to wide release, I could see this film doing fine actually into theater, if especially releasing it during October because everybody's looking for horror to look in October and you've got the name and you've got a whole new generation it's trying to appeal to with that those sensibilities possibly in there. So yeah, it's just interesting that there is, I guess the disappointment for me was the fact they didn't further go crazy where there was potential to go crazy. And it led you to think there was, I mean, down to the point to where there's this wonderful moment to where she gets stabbed and the Cenobites show up, go, yeah, we'll take you, or you can have another, and hooks come out of a hole out of her chest. You know, and I'm like, that is awesome. There's a lot of interesting ideas to explore, and they start to explore them, but then go, maybe we're going a little too far. And I'm like, no, you're not going far enough. You
And
know,
that's, well, yeah, it's a weird thing too, because as much as I didn't like this movie, I think I would have, not that it would have made me like it anymore, but I'm kind of bummed I didn't see this in a theater because all the complaints I have about it, it looks great. I mean, there's a lot going on here visually, especially like I mentioned that last 2 minutes with what happens to Voight in the afterlife. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's that thing where I'm trying to look through the white kind of mist and energy stuff that's going on to like define shapes and see what he's seeing, that I'm like glued to the screen. I think seeing that, in a big presentation would have been wonderful. It's not completely disposable to me. I just wish that the whole thing had held up as much as I think the first hour did.
And there's a number of shots in here too where you're like, man, that would have looked great on the big screen. Even the shot when they do the wide shot of the house is impressive. This mansion with this wrought iron framing around it, and the scope that they have some of these shots in is really cool. There's a wide shot to where near the end where Riley's standing in the middle of a square and she's got like 3 Cenobites around her. There's smoke, you've got the moonlight down. It's creepy gothic. It's a cool scene that would really look good on a big screen, I think. And there's a lot of spots like that for it to come out direct to Hulu. It's one of those things where I understand on one hand because that's the world we live in now. On the other hand, as far as folks, they fucking released Texas Chainsaw in the theater. Okay, Texas Chainsaw 3D, and it made money. It made its money, right? Okay, I'm just saying as some of these films, it feels like the studios now just want to dump it to if there's a hint at all that this film may not be really successful, they want to try to dump it to their streaming service. And it's sad because some of these ones, I mean, this and Prey was would have been a perfectly serviceable film on big screen too, I think, in all honesty. And instead they dumped it directly to Hulu, and it is kind of disturbing, that trend, because some of these things, I think part of it is the experience, especially with horror films, especially for a film like this where you've got the music and the sound design and you got the kind of creepy look and the shadowy stuff, and that is great to see in a big theater, to where you're not in your secure home, you're just in a theater, and there's that extra experience, and maybe that would help for some of these films that kind of struggle a bit, appeal more to people. But
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. It was David Bruckner. If he knew this was going to go theatrical or to streaming, the whole thing feels like it was made for a
a
movie theater,
screen, yeah, it was.
right?
I mean,
And so I'm wondering, like, Prey. I didn't like Prey really at all, but I will agree that especially because of the buzz around it and the positive response online to that movie, I think would have made a killing in the theater. Hellraiser, I'm not quite so sure, but I'm wondering if people are kind of looking at these movies and saying, well, the response, people really seem to dig this. So if we've got these other ones in the pipeline, maybe we can experiment with releasing these genre movies in the theater. I mean, fucking Smile is #1 at the box office for the second week in a row. I mean, the box office is really anemic because we're between like huge movies right now, but still, I mean, it took out Bros. It took out what was the big thing from this past week? I don't even remember what it was supposed to be, but yeah.
Amsterdam,
right? David O. Russell's new movie with Christian Bale. I mean, Jesus.
Which I have to cover for a Patreon. So anybody wants to talk about that. But back to Hellraiser 2022. We'll wrap it up here a bit. Ian, Will says that he likes the first 6 Hellraisers because they made some bold choices and never stuck to a genre template.
Thanks for giving me a reason to discount everything that you've said previously, Will. What? Right.
What do you mean? He said he agreed with Ian. It's the weird to see Hellraiser as a slasher film. Definitely some changes made to appeal to a theater audience, perhaps.
I don't agree with that either, but I'm just trying to save face with my previous comment.
He is trying to save face. And Will said he liked the iron cube around the house, but it makes him think of construction guys building it and being like, what the hell are we doing? You could say that for a lot of things, which now that just opens a whole nother series. We need one of those mockumentary house flipping series, but it's not it's not a house flipping series. It's a construction crew that's hired to go to these different houses that are like horror icon houses, and they're asked to build them to defend against certain things, but the guys don't know what they're talking about getting defend against. So yeah, we got to this house and they want extra alarms here because apparently some guy's walking around in a William Shatner mask and a big butcher knife, and they ask for these extra locks. Now, when I go here with these bars here, boy, they're going to be surprised when they see that, this guy with this mansion, he wants us to put this wrought iron cage around the house. I have no idea how we're going to do. I know how we're going to do that. Shut up, Bill. You don't know what you're talking about. I do know. You could have a whole little 5-minute series of segments of movie horror house flippers. There you go.
And each one of these episodes is a different crew of construction people, but there's a woman who is the host of every show, a different woman, because at the end everyone else in the construction crew is dead except for the final girl.
The final girl.
This is a great gimmick, Mark. We need to make this happen too.
We need to make this happen too,
along with Austin Powers Hellraiser.
Austin Powers Hellraiser. Such sights to show you. God, why do you always do that, Dad?
Come here, hug. You got fucking spikes coming at him.
I'm not gonna hug you. You got pins all over your head. Just come here. No, you're gonna stab me. No, come here. Come. Anyway, but Hellraiser 2022. Final thought. Ian, do you recommend this to a modern audience? I know you didn't.
I recommend Will's last comment to a. I don't know if you want to put that up there.
1 million anal beads. Only 1 million?
Wow. Talk about the sweet suffering. I recommend Hellraiser 2022 as a fascination and nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say skip it because I think there's a lot to look at. I think there's a lot of great ideas in that first hour. And I think as a student of film, if you're interested in how story mechanics work, just watch for that almost precise hour mark and watch how the movie changes. Whether or not you like how it changes or you hate how it changes, there's definitely a shift in the kind of movie it is to the kind of movie it ends up. And I think it's just something to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it a little more. I think you'll find entertainment value in it. It's one of the better modern horror films to come out. There's so many now, which I'm not complaining about being a horror fan. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of modern horror out there, and a lot of it is just kind of really haphazardly put together. But this one is interesting. It's well put together. You got a narrative. It does change that approach halfway through, but still a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting ideas, a lot of things that if they do decide to do a sequel, I would love to see them explore more, namely the origin of the priest, because for me, I enjoyed the priest. Not going to replace Doug Bradley, but they knew they had big shoes to fill, so I think they went a different direction with Pinhead in this one, and that was a smart choice rather than trying to replicate, you know, the original Pinhead. Same features in that, but this is definitely a different Pinhead than what we got out of the original in 1987. So I would recommend it as well, not only just as a fascination, but if you're looking for 31 Days of Horror, it's on Hulu too, so you can check it out. It is a little bit long for a horror film, but yeah, I dug it. Will I watch it again? Maybe eventually. It is kind of a sanitized version of the original in many ways. It's weird to say when you're talking about a film that it has people getting hooked and ripped apart and having nasty, mean things happen to them, but it still felt a bit sanitized compared to the original. And I think that's just because of the world we live in now culturally. I think it was they were trying to appeal to a larger audience, and that's why they made some of the decisions they did. So there you have it. Thank you so much for listening to us ramble. Thank you, Will, for your comments. You are very kind, gentlemen, by saying we rule.
You rule too, Will. We love you.
You definitely rule as well. And thank you for my other listeners on the live and our listeners out there who listen to our podcast. I appreciate every single one of you out there. And now, as always, this is where I give my guest a license to shill. So please, Ian, shill away.
Hi, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I also run the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube. And what do I have to shill? Well, it's spooky season, so we are back with the live streams, the Scarathon live streams. Ooh, live streams. That's even better. Every Friday, yes, every Friday in October, we're going to be going live at 7:30 p.m. Central to talk about an anniversary horror film. So this Friday, a couple days from now, the 14th, we're going to be talking about Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Looking forward to that one. And coming up later in the month, we're going to be talking about Dracula from 1992 and then Poltergeist from 1982. So come hang out. Got some good panels lined up. And it'll be a blast.
So check out all that wonderful stuff on Ian's channel, and check out all the other links on Special Mark Productions for friends of Special Mark Productions. We got a lot of great stuff there. And if you're curious, you can always check out our stuff on the Special Mark Productions channel too, once you get bored or whatnot. Though we do have some wonderful interviews. I got a great interview with Devaney Pinn and Brandon Slagle about their film Frost, which came out today. It's out actually today now on streaming. Highly recommend that one. That one's a lot of fun, and they were definitely interesting interviews for sure. I got some stuff from the Sawdust City Fright Fest coming up. Look for it soon on the channel. I just got to put it together. I'm a little busy this weekend because I'll be at the Twisted Dreams Film Festival in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we're going to hope to see Shakespeare Shitstorm from Troma finally. Been looking forward to that one. There's some folks that I know that are in that one. And then Saturday, we'll probably check out some of the films that they got going on. They got a Wisconsin Twisted Shorts block. And then after that block, I will be getting an award for thank you. It's weird to say, very weird for me to say. But Wisconsin Backbone of Horror. And you can actually get tickets for just each individual film, or you can get a pass for the whole weekend events. Sunday, they're doing a live Rat Bat. I forgot the full name of it, but they're doing a live performance of music to the original silent Nosferatu. So so it's gonna be that I'm gonna probably end up missing because it's a Sunday evening and I gotta head back. But yeah, they are doing a live performance of Nosferatu, so that should be interesting. There's a lot of interesting films playing, so yeah, you'll want to check that out if you're in the Milwaukee area and all that. So I will stop babbling. Thank you so much as always. And we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
good night. We'll have such sights to show you next week.
Ooh,
with
nice.
Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. So stay tuned, folks. Thank you.